FBI crime data shows that hate crimes are on the rise for the third year in a row. The most prevalent hate crimes are motivated by prejudice against those of a different race or ethnicity. This includes prejudice against others for things like the color of their skin, their presumed nationality, the country where they are from, as well as the language that they speak. This is followed by hate crimes committed against people because of their religious beliefs, whether it be anti-Jewish or anti-Muslim. Social media has become the most popular means for extremists to find an audience and deliver messages of bigotry and hate. They use platforms like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook to find people who think as they do, to spread extreme and generally false information, and to promote or incite bigotry, often in the form of endorsing acts of extreme prejudice and violence. They also use them to make direct threats against individuals or groups, to document their extremist beliefs, and even to document their crimes. This can include threats, acts of property destruction, acts of violence, and even murder in the form of written confessions, photographs, recorded video, and live video streaming. In the United States, those who promote bigoted speech and agendas will argue that they are protected by the Constitution, that freedom of speech is guaranteed by the First Amendment. However, freedom of speech is not protected when it is defamatory, incites violence, or comes in the form of bigotry. These forms of speech are actually, in many instances, criminal or civil violations. Moreover, the right to free speech in the Constitution was specifically referring to Congress and the U.S. government. Only the government and its agents are forbidden from making laws to prohibit a citizen's free speech, with many notable exceptions. For example, law enforcement employees are not generally allowed to say anything disparaging about their agency, especially if it's true. They must complain up the chain of command and are not allowed to go to the press or speak on social media without potential consequences. However, private employers and private citizens are not able to make laws. They make their own employee rules, which can limit speech, and in the case of social media, they set their own terms of service. They cannot compel you to work for them, and they cannot compel you to use their services. Any abridgment of your speech is therefore voluntary. This brings us back to social media platforms like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. The terms of service for most prohibit posting threats of violence, documenting criminal acts, or hate speech of any kind. Most recently, Facebook has enacted a ban on groups, individuals, and speech promoting white nationalism because of its direct association with white supremacy. But there has been a lot of confusion about what that actually means. Not just this specific ban, but what these crimes are, and how to identify them. This conversation is absolutely vital in the forensic community, as we are often used to help establish the motives and behaviors associated with crime. We cannot do that if we do not know what they are, whether they be the law or the motives. What we find, however, is that most of these conversations are not taking place because most citizens and even forensic practitioners don't know the related facts, research, or law in relation to hate crimes. They're therefore making decisions based on incomplete or false information, and are making, and in this instance of, in the case of professional forensic examiners, they are making professional decisions based on personal beliefs fueled by their own biases and prejudices. So we've decided to have this conversation. We've had it many times, and it starts with acknowledging that all human beings have basic human rights, that all human beings deserve equal protection under the law, and that all human beings have equal value. Nobody has more intrinsic value than anyone else. Thinking otherwise is where bigotry begins. Okay, today is Wednesday, April 10th, 2019. I am here with my colleague, Dr. Aurelio Coronado. He is a member, he works with he's the director of Ciencia Aplicada in Mexico and Aguascalientes, but he also is the director of our forensic psychology program here at the Forensic Criminology Institute. Today we're going to talk about hate crimes. And the reason why this is so important is, there's a number of reasons, but there's a number of events that have occurred in the last, over the last couple of years and in the last couple of weeks that have made this issue come right to the forefront yet again. Are you here? Aurelio, are you with me, brother?
Yeah. How are you, man?
I'm doing very well. Let's see if we can't get your audio up. What I want to do is have a conversation about hate crimes.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. One, as you know, since the new president has taken office, well, it's fair to, first we need to acknowledge that after Barack Obama took office, hate crimes surged in the United States, and then they kind of went down. All right?
Yeah.
And then, now that President Trump is in office, hate crimes have surged again, but they're not actually going down. They're spiking dramatically and continuing up. Now, the reason why this matters is at the present moment, in the last 2 weeks, is because there's been this new policy developed at Facebook to essentially acknowledge the alignment of white nationalism with white supremacy for the first time.
Yeah.
It's not the first time it's being acknowledged. It's the first time Facebook is understanding that has occurred.
Exactly.
And it's also that there was testimony this week on Capitol Hill regarding hate crimes and the numbers and what's involved and the kind of crimes that are being committed. But the FBI is finally releasing some of their data, and it's not looking very good. So I feel like it's incumbent upon us to have a conversation about what hate crimes are and what they involve. So before we get started, I wanted to just go over a couple of things. The first of all is that in the United States, hate crimes are on the rise for the third straight year in a row, according to the FBI. That the absolute largest numbers are associated with a dramatic increase of hate crimes associated with race, ethnicity, and ancestry, followed by religion, and then followed by sexual orientation. And then finally, here's another infographic. The top one is hate crime by category, race, ethnicity at the top at 59.6%, religion at 20.6%, sexual orientation at 15.8%, so 16. But again, it's on the rise. And there's a lot of, and basically I want to give a definition of hate crimes as the federal government defines it very quickly. Hate crimes are crimes motivated by bias against race, ethnicity, ancestry, religion, sexual orientation, disability, gender, and gender identity. And it can take the form of any crime. So hate crimes are defined by virtue of the motivation of the bias against someone. And the specific crimes can include things like harassment, threats, property seizure and damage, violence, physical harm, which includes assault, rape, and murder. So any crime that's committed with these motives, with the motive associated with hate towards a specific group, all right? Any felony or violent crime based on prejudice against a particular group. That's how the American Psychological Association defines it. They are prejudice's most extreme expression. Compared to other crimes, hate crimes have a broader impact on victims and communities because they target core aspects of identity. So it's not just an attack on a person in specific, it's an attack on their identity. And we'll talk about this a little bit, I suppose, which is about the other person's identity. That's how the APA gets involved. And it doesn't have to be, I want you to talk to me a little bit, Aurelio, about the problem of using hate. Because this idea, there has to be hate, it has to be seething, it has to be, talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, it's like there's going to be a talk about when we start using the term femicide in Latin America.
Yes.
They've been saying like it's a hate crime, it's a gender crime, and most of the academics start saying it's because we can put it in the hate crime category.
Right.
That is not really what's going on. Because there's starting some experts to say like, if it's a hate crime, the guy who's a femicide needs to hate all the women all the time, Right. Because hate is an emotion.
Right.
But that doesn't make any sense.
No.
It's not about an actual emotion. It's more like you say, it's a set of biases. So the problem with hate crimes is like when people hear it, they start thinking in all these emotions you can see the emotions.
Right.
Most of the hate crimes maybe is for being even condescended with someone else.
Well, it's not about the emotion hate. That's the problem right there. Yeah. So that's the first thing we need to get out of the way. That's a mislabeling from day one. What it's really about is bias and prejudice, which sometimes take the form of things like racism or anti-Semitism or things like that. So it's not about the person who's doing it feeling the emotion of hate. It's about the person who's doing it having their identity challenged and needing to destroy or eradicate or attack the identity of somebody else.
It's how they see the world.
Right.
In front of the other identity.
Right, and it can take the form.
Position.
And it can take the form. Usually, it takes the form of maybe like you say, there's bias and prejudice, but that can be things like you can have somebody who just thinks that, well, you know, they're good people, they're trying, and they're just disadvantaged. It's just so sad, and we have to take care of them. We have to help them because they're, you know, it's so sad. Instead of thinking this is a human being that has the same. Here's how it has to work this way. If you don't see another human being as having the same inherent value as you, then there's some bias or prejudice going on with you. Like you're from Mexico, I'm from the United States. The way that my culture tends to view Mexicans is in a very negative and hostile way, as though they don't have the same rights, they don't have the same value as a human being. And the way that I'm sure that in your culture, you view people from the United States, is that there's this belief that we think we're better than everybody else, and so that creates its own inherent hostilities. So talk to me a little bit about that.
It's about, you know, the otherness. You know, there is this world where I'm the standard, you know, and the otherness is whatever is not the standard. So that's because, let's talk about poverty. Poverty, we have a very big problem about basically hating people who are in that position.
And maybe the word hate can be transposed into the word blame. We blame them for their poverty. We don't like their poverty, so we are biased against people who are poor. We are biased against people who don't own a house or who don't have the same social class as us, right?
Yeah, it's like what happened in Mexico when we start having there's always been migration from the south.
Yeah, always.
Well, but we don't have any problems, you know, in terms of the public speech about, you know, Americans that come, Europeans that come to Mexico.
Right.
They basically are buying lands and actually hurting some areas or whatever. But if you see some people from El Salvador, and you're seeing that they are poor or they have needs, now there's a problem. So
and in the United States, we have the same issue, right? Yeah. If you see somebody coming from Norway or somebody coming from Europe or somebody coming from Russia, somebody coming from Asia, you don't immediately think to yourself that's a problem. You don't think of those as immigrants. You think, oh, those are regular people. But then someone comes from Mexico and they speak Spanish, or someone comes from Latin America and they speak a variation of Spanish, all of a sudden they're furious. That's somebody who's poor. That's somebody who's dirty. That's somebody who's different. Or Africa, somebody who's who's got a dark, basically the same old trope. The darker the skin color, the more, the less value they have as a person. And that's a theme that exists, I think, just about every continent, right? Because it's associated with indigenous populations. That's where it comes from. Yeah.
Well, there's some, especially some black academics who do a really good work to trace the racism. And they start seeing the relationship between, you know, the commerce of people, basically slavery from Africa to United States. Because they need to, you know, rationalize that, to say that, okay, before slavery, there's not even a good discussion about this. They're saying like, okay, they're, you know, from other country, whatever. Right. And then when there's an economic gain about this, they start saying these discourses about, no, they are lesser people. They are second-class people. They don't know that smart, whatever.
It's really an argument to rationalize a failure to communicate with those indigenous populations or those different groups, to communicate, and two, to exploit them, either by taking their land, taking their property, or by taking their labor, whether that's physical labor, sexual exploitation, anything they can. We do it in Africa. We do it in Latin America. It's usually based in the economic needs of the person who is doing it. And they're not, I don't think enough people in the United States are educated on that issue to understand that that's why they're constantly being fed those images, because it's a question of what do we need, who has it, and if they have it, that we should have it. Our need basically becomes a right or an entitlement. Like the example I would think of right now off the top of my head is the selenium that's used to make cell phones in Africa. That's the fight right now. Yeah. We have completely marginalized and ignored that country, and we're happy to let it tear itself apart because it benefits us. Because it absolutely benefits us.
So I think that's a very good view of the hate crimes. It's not about only cognitive prejudice, like you learn it this way. These prejudice help a whole system, a whole economic system.
That's right.
So that's why it's very hard to, fight it, or very hard to educate people, because they need to know history. They need to
Right.
Start seeing different, the world as it is.
They need to understand, one, that other people have value and that they exist, and that their existence is not a crime, despite what you think. And then two, that there are all manner of people that go across borders every day for commerce. I always think in terms of like when I hear people talking about border issues, especially from Mexico to the United States, or United States to Mexico, I constantly think about how much time you and I together have multiple times have we not crossed the border together, right? And you're a Mexican citizen, I'm an American citizen, with no problem whatsoever. And what do we see?
No.
The same thing every single time. I mean, you get on a plane, you fly even to my home in Sitka. I mean, that's something that you do. But the point is, when we're down on the border, what do we see? Miles of lines of people in the morning lining up to cross into the United States on foot, and same by vehicle, and at night, miles coming back because of the commerce. And whether it's trucks or cars or people on foot, the commerce that goes back and forth between the United States and Mexico is vital to the existence of both countries. Isn't that right? Isn't that correct?
Exactly. The economic point of view at this moment is like immigration basically is good.
Yep.
It's not even like, let's take that idea away, like that doesn't increase crime. That's a myth.
No.
More immigration creates more crime. That's a myth.
No.
But even more immigration, obviously, with regulation, stuff, politics,
and security, of course.
It increases the economy. It gets better in the economy.
Yes.
The problem is that politics use it for voting.
That's right.
For creating groups, for creating the otherness.
And not just for voting, but to divide people.
Yeah.
To divide people and put citizens against each other, not just to create an otherness in terms of a foreign nation and foreign cultures, but within the culture itself, within your own nation, within your own culture, to suggest that somehow we're different because, oh, look at these people, they don't love the country as much as you do. They don't value the country as much because look what they're allowing, look what they want. Well, I'll tell you what I want. What I want is free trade. I want free and open trade. I want border security, just like you guys do. Like when we travel, for example, I know one of your pet peeves. When we travel in the United States, I can drive from state to state to state to state to state without any problems whatsoever, and that's good on one level. It's frustrating on another, but it's good. There's police in every state. There's every highways patrolled and that kind of stuff. So I don't feel like I'm in. Depending on the region, you're a different kind of danger depending on what city you are, depending on the law enforcement there. But in Mexico, for example, when you and I are driving around, we go from say, let's pick a random one, Guadalajara to Aguascalientes. Isn't that your favorite? I think personally that's your favorite checkpoint. Because
I love it.
Yeah, I know you love it so much. And the reason why is because that's where you're going to get stopped. Because Aguascalientes is a very safe state. Very, imagine, I don't know, like Montana or something like that. It's like Montana. It's very nice. The crime is very low. The people are very friendly. There's lots of farming community, right? Wide open, rolling hills. It's beautiful. But Guadalajara is a little different. It's a little more of a narco state. Right? It's a little more dangerous, a little more narco state. So there is every border of every state has a security on it with the military, or is it national police or the military? Who's there?
It's the military and the federal police, the national police.
Right, so it's both of them working these borders together. And it's usually just young kids, right? It's just kids.
Yeah,
it's just very young kids who are just following orders. They got no idea. They're not very well educated. They're not very well trained, but they're very well armed.
Yeah.
I mean, they got all the toys. And they will pull you over randomly. I say randomly because, it's not random. They just pull you over and they can go through your stuff. And again, that happens in Mexico. I know you hate it. I hate it too, but at the same time, I'm like, well, it's fine. I don't care. Yeah, I'm not doing anything illegal, so unless they're going to try to ask me for money, which I know happens. You and I have been through that too together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the problem in Mexico is that one of those two things. Yeah. You can go one of those, what would be the name? The people, when you go and there's retén, what's the name you use in English?
A checkpoint?
a checkpoint.
Yeah.
It can be a narco checkpoint.
Yeah. Remember that one checkpoint?
They can be dressed as police.
Yeah.
They can be narcos.
Yeah, they can. Remember that one checkpoint where the activists took over?
Yes.
We were at a checkpoint one time with the activists that took it over, and you weren't giving them money. They'd had a bucket out, and you just handed them some money, and then they let you through.
Yeah.
That was great.
That's one problem. The other one is that we have a forced disappearance problem. So
where they're taking people.
That you know, and nothing is going to happen. But there's another ones you need to be suspicious about that.
And the other one is the case we just finished working, the sleepy detective case, where you have police officers who are forcing women who are by themselves to pull over and coercing them into sexual activity, saying, "Oh, we can't let you get back in your car. You look sleepy. You look too tired. It's too dangerous for you to be on the road." And so, but let's get back on track here. The bottom line is, whenever you have these increases in security, you have whenever you have security, when you have people in charge, there's an ability to exploit it. And what I have found is that I feel like the people who are having the conversation about hate crimes, immigration, border security, they are people who don't actually know anything about any of these issues. That's the concern that I have. I hear a lot, and the problem is regular citizens are getting pumped this information on the news and on social media, and now they think they have information. What they have is an opinion from somebody who doesn't actually know anything, and who's never actually been to the border, who doesn't actually know any people from Latin America, their idea of Latin America comes from the 1970s and the 1980s. There's a lot of old people that I know who are like, "Oh man, well I've been to blah blah blah," and it's like this. And I'm like, "Really? When was the last time you were there?" "Oh, 1974." You know, it's like, "Oh, okay. Well, it's not. I was in California in 1990, and it's not the same as it is now. It's completely changed." But the point is, there are a lot of people chiming in on these issues that are not very well educated, who don't know what they are, and I think it's partially to talk about the Facebook policy, to this idea that white nationalism is associated with the neo-Nazis and with white supremacy. Talk to me a little bit about that, if you can.
Well, basically, what they're trying to do is to ban all the content around these ideas, because there's this, this confrontation about free speech and hate and hate speech. Like, okay, we need to. You cannot say anything. That's the thing. In your country, in my country, there's limits about free speech.
Right.
Let's remember to anyone that free speech is one. They call it a very basic human right, but it's more accurate to say that it's one of the oldest human rights.
Right.
That is going to be. They basically create the free speech because there's a very different setup of the relationship between citizens and power.
Yes.
Because citizens in history cannot speak against government.
That's right.
So that's why.
And the government and oppressive governments punish people for speaking their mind. And
exactly.
And there is a difference between. I want to make this very clear. There is free speech that's guaranteed by our Constitution. It's so important. It's right up there at the top. Now, but here's the problem. You have freedom of speech, but you also do not have freedom from the consequences of your speech. There's also hate speech is not protected. So, or speech that endangers other people. Like, for example, you can't scream fire in a crowded theater because people will try to escape and get trampled to death thinking that they're in danger when they're not. You can't, yes, you have freedom of speech, but you can't accuse someone of a crime they didn't commit. Yes, you have freedom of speech. But you cannot defame somebody or libel or slander them. There's consequences for that. Do you see what I mean? See what I'm getting at? There are legal prohibitions.
Yeah, that's a very good component. The other component is you can only threat your free speech by the government.
Right.
It's like if you put someone in your Facebook feed, and someone puts something racist and you erase that, that's not against his freedom of speech because you're not the government.
No, you're not.
You decide whatever is in your feed.
So the only person that can oppress your freedom to speak is the government, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. So here, let me just.
Very important because most of the people think that freedom of speech, if you say something, shut up, that's racist. Oh, that's against my freedom of speech. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
I'm just regulate the conversation.
So we have to conversation regulation is actually pretty important. Let's define white nationalism very quickly. The Southern Poverty Law Center defines white nationalism as groups that espouse white supremacist or white separatist ideology, often focusing on the allegedly inferiority of non-whites.
Groups listed under these categories include, white nationalist groups include the Ku Klux Klan, the Neo-Confederates, Neo-Nazis, skinheads, and there's a group called Christian Identity. These are all groups that can be described accurately as white nationalists. And let me see if I have another one here. I just want to make sure this. And that's the other thing is there's a lot of mass shootings that are associated heavily with white nationalists. A lot of these the violent extremists are coming from these white nationalist movements because it's an extreme idea that only white people have value, that only white people have, or that they have the most value. Well, one of the things that I see, and I want to see if I tick the boxes here, and what you agree with and what you don't. What I see is I see too many people who are in government service who are either poorly educated or politically oriented, and they make decisions about whether or not to do their job effectively or to follow the laws based on their prejudices and their biases, based on their belief system. So they don't know the law, or they know the law and they don't like it. So what they do is they like, someone will come to them for an application for something. Someone will come to them for, say, a license or a marriage. Let's say it's a marriage license. Let's say it's a driver's license. Someone will come to them wanting something or needing something that they're lawfully allowed to have, right? Or in some cases, lawfully required to get. And that person in the government situation will basically deny that person access and deny that person the protection of the state or the rights that they're entitled to based on their subjective experience. Come back when your father's with you. Come back when your husband's with you. Or I need you to have somebody else sign for this because I don't trust you. Or I need you to have. I need 7 forms of identification. Yeah. Because I don't trust who you are. Where if somebody comes in who's white, looks wealthy, drives a nice car, no problem. That door's all open for them. Yeah. Do you remember? You weren't there for this, but that was one of the most extreme examples I saw. This is when I was buying that emerald in Bogota. Was it Bogota? Oh. No, it was not Bogota. It was Guadalajara. That's right. I was in Guadalajara, and I was buying an emerald, and they roped the whole area off. They were kicking people out. They were moving people left and right. All the people who were indigenous to the area, they were not allowed in. I was given there was these 2 models that were brought in to serve me. They were serving me free tequila, and other people tried to come up and buy stuff. They didn't want anything to do with them. It was very disturbing. And I'm not in charge of that, but the person who's in charge, they are making these decisions based on who they think I am and my accent and the color of my skin. Talk to me a little bit about that. Because it's the everyday stuff. The big stuff makes it easy to identify, but it's the everyday stuff that we just kind of have to become accustomed to and live with that I think makes makes us ignore the bigger stuff too much. Tell me what you think.
Exactly. It's because we live in I was talking with some students yesterday. Yeah. And we were talking about alienation. These people who have this condition that they don't see the reality as it is. And I say, we don't live that far from that mindset. No. Because if you read any actual report on economy or equality, you can very fast learn that you cannot become rich if you work hard.
Yeah, hard work does not guarantee wealth.
No, we're not going to get wealth because you are, have the right mindset or whatever. Because the economy is arranged that the people who have more start having, keep having more. So, but I say to them, but we still keep thinking in those terms. Right. We go to the school thinking that we are going to overcome the odds or whatever. Right. So the problem is that we're being trained to think that if you push the guy who's behind you, you're going to have very chances to go from this promised land that basically is way out of your range. Right. So I think that's one of the psychological mechanism that is behind this treatment. But also, there's a structural problem, like you have all these magazines of people saying this entrepreneur of this grade, they're all rich people saying that they have this success story. These guys who wrote these books about success and 7 keys to get rich or whatever. They're all rich. It's like Hollywood. Everybody's rich. Yeah. They're trying to say they become from, they work in a bar or wherever. Yeah. But they're all related.
This is the perpetuation of this false notion of the American dream, where if you can rise from nothing and become a multimillionaire. Well, first of all, being a millionaire isn't what it was even 10 years ago. Money is just not worth that much as it used to be. But more importantly, hard work does not guarantee success. You can work. In fact, the people who work the hardest are the people making the least. They're almost. It's almost a guarantee that the harder you're working, the more danger that you put yourself in, the less money you're making. It's almost guaranteed. Because who's really anybody who's really got wealth is doing everything they can to insulate their wealth from the dangers of your poverty, right? I mean, it's all insulated. Or your tax. Right. The wealthiest people, they don't pay taxes. That's the most interesting thing about that. So again,
a little advantage.
But let's go back to the issue of hate crimes. This social structure creates the attitude among people who are not wealthy, who actually are impoverished and working hard, that because they are not they're not wealthy yet, that's just temporary, because they're working really hard and they're going to earn it, or they're going to have, or some savior is going to come along, some individual politician is going to come along and help them out and just give them that one break that they need, and then everything will be okay. And then when that politician fails to deliver on their promise, what do? Oh, I did everything I could. It's those immigrants. Those immigrants are taking your jobs and devaluing things. When in fact, what they're really talking, whenever I hear people talking about immigrants, they talk about, especially in Mexico, I'm very sensitive to the Mexican issue because I have so many friends in Mexico and I do so much work down there. Whenever I hear somebody say immigrant about Mexico, I think, you mean our trading partners? You mean our partners in economic trade? You mean that's who you're talking? The people who sell us our limes and our avocados and who sell us all the other fruit that we have, all those people. You mean our migrant labor class that comes up during the summer and picks all of our fruit for us? Those people. The people that we're partnered with, who we need, those people. Is that who you're talking about? I mean, it's
very contradictory, but it's working.
That's the problem.
It's working in Brazil. It's working in Argentina. It's working everywhere. It's working now in Colombia too.
So let's.
People.
And that's totally correct. What I want to ask you is this then. We have these definitions that are very good. They're very solid. They're based in very solid scientific research. Everybody should have access to them by now. And the only people who do not ascribe to them are the people who are engaging in that kind of hate speech. And that's very transparent. How do we solve this problem? How do we reduce the number of hate crimes? What's the silver bullet? Or what's one of, if you had like 5 things you can do, or 3, let's go 3 things we could do right now to start helping us understand the limit to reduce the number of hate crimes. How do we address this issue? I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours.
Well, obviously it's very cliche, but I think education. But I mean, regulate the education. There's a lot of interest group to try to say like, oh, the kids need to learn everything, Right. When I mean everything is intelligent design or whatever. But no, come on, this is public interest. You need to know facts. You need to understand how. So
when people say things, I have heard many times people say we need to get the Bible back into the school. Well, first of all, the first thing I'm thinking is the Bible was never allowed in school, not in public schools. It was never supposed to be there. That is completely false. The second thing I think of is, have you read the Bible? Because it's full of a lot of hate crimes committed by one group against another simply because of their race. Simply because of their lack of adherence to a particular religious set of beliefs. There's a lot of violence that occurs in the Bible and a lot of hate crimes that are perpetuated. And more importantly, the most religious nations are the ones with the most violence. And that's because one group decides what's right for everybody, and then they just start killing everybody else, or they start it incenses the violence against the groups of other people that are not falling in line with those belief systems. That's always a bad idea. Whether you're in Africa, whether you're in India, whether you're in London, whether you're in the Middle East. I guess I forgot about the Middle East there for a second. They still haven't figured it out there. That's where it all started, and it still hasn't been figured out there. In fact, their hatred of each other in the Middle East has infected our politics here in the United States, even though this was supposed to be the place we were supposed to get away from all that. So whenever I hear people talking about, we need to start teaching the principles of the Bible. No, we don't. Those have no place in our public schools. We need to be teaching, like you said, science, facts, and evidence, real information, not fake information.
Critical thinking.
Well, that's the first part right there. Not based on belief, critical thinking. Doubt me, doubt you, doubt everybody. Get facts, get evidence. And that's a real education. That's a really big one. Give me another one. So education is good.
one of the biggest things that we are involved in that is to decrease the impunity. You know,
Right.
we need to have better investigators that understand
So-
all these things that we are talking, and
So-
actual criminal investigation.
Okay, so
actual
impunity-
forensic investigation.
For those people who don't know, impunity means when you are engaged in a behavior, usually criminal,
Yeah.
and there are no consequences. You can behave with impunity. You can behave as though there are no consequences.
Yeah.
And that's what impunity is. But really what you're talking about is actual accountability and oversight. So there needs to be, I will say this right now. In the United States, we have some really good laws on the books. Some really great laws on the books, in fact. I think we have some of the best laws in the nation. Yeah, we have a lot of screwed up ones, a lot of ones that are maybe outdated. But for the most part, I like most of the laws that we have. I don't think most of them are that bad. Some of them are, like I said, outdated, and those are the exception, not the rule. What we have a problem with is because our laws recognize crime, they recognize vulnerable populations, and they recognize corruption. The problem is when people decide they're not going to enforce them. When you have police agencies or government agencies that decide, or even internally or externally, the agencies decide, well, I'm not going to enforce this because that's my friend, or I'm not going to enforce that because I don't believe in it, or I'm not going to enforce it because I don't think it's appropriate. I'm going to use my discretion to protect my friend, to protect myself because I'm doing the same thing. That's the problem that I see. So that's what you mean by impunity. There has to be oversight, right?
So, because if you have impunity, you send a message to other people who are, have these ideas like, okay, this is allowed to. That's why you have a president or whatever,
That's
you
right.
start saying those things.
Yeah.
You start giving permission to do it.
Well, the argument that I hear over and over again from Americans who support the current administration is he's just saying the things that I want to say, first of all, basically meaning I'm a hateful person inside. And two, and I have no filter. And two, all politicians are corrupt. He's just the most obvious one.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I want to say about that kind of stuff is one, not all people are corrupt. The only time we have corrupt politicians is when we allow it. So that what you're saying is I'm willing to allow that because he's my kind of corrupt.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Any corruption is bad, whether it's Barack Obama doing something bad, or Hillary Clinton, or Donald Trump, or it doesn't matter who it is. If they're a person in a position of power and authority and they are abusing it, they need to be held to account. It doesn't matter who they are. If you have a belief system based on a person, an individual, and allowing them to get away with it, then you're basically engaging in a cult of celebrity. If you have a belief system my belief system is based entirely on Constitution of the United States. That's what I think is my guiding document. And that's because I work in the justice system, and that's what we are required to swear an oath to uphold that almost every time we go into court and testify. So the two things: education, real education on facts and evidence, and I don't mean education like everything. What I mean is an education about the diverse nature of existence. So that to understand that there are other cultures, other belief systems, other people on the planet who exist, and that their existence is valid, and it's just as valid as yours.
Education about your own emotions too.
Yes.
Because we only teach people, facts and stuff, but you need to understand too how you create relationships, how you feel yourself about your identity. That lacks in basically in everywhere in the education.
What's the number one problem we see in crime other than alcohol and drugs? It's going to be anger and jealousy.
Yeah.
People unable to form competent, coherent relationships with themselves and with other people, and it comes from their parents. Their parents don't know how to do it. Their parents don't have intimacy skills. The parents don't transmit those any intimacy skills to their kids, so they go off to the world unable to form actual bonds with other people, and this is manifest not just in racism and prejudice and bias, but also in their inability to form real attachments with other people. I have found that in my experience, there's a correlation between people who are extremely racist, people who are extremely biased and prejudiced, and their own ability to form real bonds with the people around them. Even if they say they do it through a mechanism like the church, so that they can control the family. It's not a relationship based on emotion or a relationship based on anything other than their perceptions of their ability to control other people. And I see that as a failing. And if you want to start looking at it, just see how they see the wake of relationships that they've gone through in their past. It's really awful to see. I see this a lot, and it concerns me. It concerns me that we're not teaching people how to have relationships, or what even a relationship is.
And we can say the same with the machismo culture, of course.
Well, that's a huge symptom of that problem, right? Because
toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity, the idea that the male has to be in charge and the female has their place, and that these gender roles exist, and if somebody's not following them, they need to be kicked back into place. Whether it's a female who's acting like they should have rights and have opinions and be in charge of anything, or if it's a male who's acting too effeminate or too weak. It seems
basically that's very interesting, because there's now a couple of studies that say that there's a correlation in terms of network between white nationalism and all these men right activists.
Yes.
And all this stuff, you know, the incel groups and all this stuff, like, basically have the same people, you know, talking each other and create more hate around now. Now the women doesn't want to be with us because now they're having too much freedom. It's the same. It's these illegals. Now they have these people who are immigrants. Now they are ruling the country. You know?
Right.
Now the women are having all the money and all the. That's the thing. Their identity feels threatened.
Yes.
And it's a very weak identity.
Yeah.
So that's one of the starting point of the hate crime.
And here's an important concept for people to grasp if they don't already about identity. If you have a clear understanding of your identity and who you are as a person, there's not a single other person in the world who could threaten it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the thing, right? Yeah. I never look at another person's weakness and think to myself, well, that threatens me. It means I got to do something. No. Mm-hmm. The only time I ever am worried about someone else's behavior is if it's somebody that I care about, or if it's something that's going to affect, impact my society or my culture or whatever. But it's not about me. If they're making choices that are good for them, that are healthy for them, that are making them a happier person, then that's always going to be better for me. And no choice that any other person makes threatens me. Someone else's desire to eat a different flavor of ice cream doesn't threaten me. Your love of menudo, your insane love of street tacos and menudo, your insane love for those things doesn't affect anything. Yeah. What's that greasy shit you like to eat on the streamer we were in?
It's called the greasy shit.
Well, the greasy shit. Remember you and Pepe had it, and it was all fat and greasy, soupy. Remember? And I went and
birria. Are you talking bad about birria?
Nobody's talking bad about anything. I want to make that very clear. Okay. I want to make this very clear. No one's talking bad about you, your culture, or your street tacos.
Okay.
No one's talking bad about it. Okay. I have eaten street tacos at 2 a.m. with you many times. This is not a strange thing for me. But just because
you like your greasy food, you know, in a McDonald's box. I know, it's very different.
What? Well, I prefer it in a
You're giving the money to to someone who are trying to make the American dream. Give the money to the street tacos guy. You're giving the money to the street tacos guy.
Remember that 2 a.m. with the mom and the son working in Puebla? Remember that? And I remember that girl I gave that $10 to, and you got mad at me. I can't please you. That's what I've learned.
No, man, Guadalajara.
Well, I know that was Guadalajara. I'm just saying, we've been lots of places together. You've tried to get me to eat a lot of shitty food. Some of it I've eaten, some of it I haven't. And your enjoyment of that food doesn't affect me. And my enjoyment of, things like prime rib and pollo quempero.
Think that for the environment.
Is this about cows and methane?
Okay. Just, read some science.
Oh God! But my point is, you and I like very different things. I think there are things that you and I enjoy that are the same. There are also things that you and I both hate together. Like, remember that shitty food in that Colombian? There was that Colombian movie theater that we went to, and we ordered all this really fancy food, and it was so awful. Sinopolis. Yeah.
Cinépolis in Colombia, come on.
Oh my God! It was the worst hot dogs. I mean, hot dogs are bad by themselves, but those were the worst. But none of that. You like stuff that I don't like. I like stuff that you don't like. We hate some of the same things. We like some of the same things. That's the way it should be, right? We're different people.
Yeah.
It's okay for that to be the case. I don't think people have reconciled that reality enough that it's okay for other people to like different things.
It's because we live now, I don't know if that's one thing, but
yeah.
we live now in a virtual world where they're constantly feed us with the things we like.
Right.
You know, my feed is full of things I like. You know?
Yeah.
Hollywood is only giving me the movies I want.
Right.
Because the trailers I see is only for the movies I like.
That's right.
I'm not seeing any French trailer from any movies or whatever. So I think we need to start having, that's the point. You don't only need to, cut or trying to regulate these speeches about white nationalism.
Right.
You also need to have other types of, that people can have access to other types of information.
And that's why I was talking to my son today about this, about in Great Britain, how they still have basic reading requirements for different, like Shakespeare and,
exactly.
and things like that. That we get rid of those things in the United States. Something offends us, we get rid of it. Something we don't like, we get rid of it. Instead of saying, hey, you need to understand all this stuff. You can't just take the stuff you like. You got to look at some of the stuff you don't like and understand why, and understand those ideas and why maybe they work and why maybe they don't work, and maybe they don't have anything to do with you. But that's the point of a liberal arts education, is to make you a well-rounded person so that you are well informed about the things that you like and don't like. And well, let's start this again. We have too many people who are in the forensic science community who are not having this conversation. Tell me why again. Why are they not having this conversation, and why is it necessary?
Because I think the institutions try to control this narrative. When you see the books, the literature about forensic science, it's very technical. They don't have this dimension of critical thinking.
It's about following procedures.
Exactly. Follow this procedure, and justice always work, and the institutions don't have any problem. So you can, do your job, and everybody's happy. No, well, the problem is that our institutions have failures.
Yes.
And we need to acknowledge, and these failures sometimes are related to these conversations that we're having.
So for example, the National Academy of Sciences report came out in 2009, and it made something clear. And it made something clear that has been always clear about the forensic sciences, which is that it can only exist in its best and most competent form when it is separate from the mission, objectives, and control of law enforcement. All scientists know and accept this. The only scientists who do not are the scientists who work for law enforcement because they're trying to keep their jobs.
They want to work for law enforcement.
So progress occurs as you move crime labs and forensic scientists away from the control of police agencies, so that they're not manipulated or influenced. And that includes district attorneys, that includes law enforcement officers, all that stuff. So what happened this week in Orange County is that, against the NAS report, against the advice of the best commission of scientists and forensic people in the nation, the crime lab in Orange County went back under the control of law enforcement. It took a huge step backwards. And the reason why it matters is because there's been so many lawsuits in Orange County, California. Orange County is where Santa Ana is. It's where Disneyland is. It's right south of Los Angeles. And they've had so many lawsuits in relation to not only evidence planting and manipulation of witnesses, hiding evidence, evidence testing, but this lab has been under the control of the district attorney's office too much. And you've had multiple times when the district attorney's office representatives have gone to the crime lab and essentially coerced them into changing findings. And this is not an opinion of mine. This is a statement based on the facts and evidence from the appellate court that has found in favor of criminal defendants who have raised these issues, documented them, and demonstrated them. So we have a political failure in the forensic sciences, where it's controlled by law enforcement, controlled by the district attorney's offices, and we're not, those people that work there, because that's who writes their checks, they're not able to have those conversations without fear of getting fired.
Exactly. So it's not about the forensic scientist doesn't want to talk about this, or doesn't, have the critical thinking about it, of doing it. It's because we have structural problems around this.
Well,
if you keep a forensic scientist, ignorant, it's very easy to control the outcome.
Well, the other problem, yeah, that's the desire is to control the outcome. That's the first thing. The very, very important. But more importantly, when you hire people to work as forensic scientists who are either not qualified or who value loyalty over science and objectivity, that's a problem. And we have that in the States. You have that in Mexico. It's a problem everywhere. But what needs to be happening in the forensic science community is there needs to be a discussion about the dimensions of the types of crime that they're investigating, that they're helping to establish, the dimensions and the layers of the law that are being addressed, and without consideration for the political needs of the people who are trying to influence them. And that's the hardest part. So that goes along with not just an education of the citizenry, but an education of the professionals who are involved in investigating these types of crimes. And one of the things that one of the first cases that I did a ride along on with law enforcement back in Portland was a case where one homosexual man had basically committed a false hate crime against himself to get the attention of somebody of his partner who was leaving him and moving out. And he had burglarized his residence and staged it and spray foamed some hate speech on the wall with his shaving cream. And the guy I was with, the police officer I was with, he was an instructor at the university. He said, yeah, you just gotta get used to it. You get a thick skin to it. This is the kind of thing that the gay people do to each other all the time. It's pretty common. So he basically, I come out, I make a show, and then I leave, and then they'll resolve it among themselves. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, this is only going to encourage this to keep happening. It's not really addressing the problem. It's very responsive. I don't know necessarily what the solution was to that, but ignoring it certainly is not a solution. And pretending it's not going on. And then what you basically have is a situation where they could become a domestic violence situation very fast, or a domestic issue very fast. There's a need for a human dimension there that's not being accounted for. It's just responsive and list following. So the callousness towards that is almost learned. It's institutional, like you were saying.
Yes.
So the education has to be with professionals as well, is what I was saying.
What I'm seeing in the forensic community is that we have the duty to understand complex problems, like we speaking like hate crimes, thinking femicide, thinking crimes against humanity.
Yes, and what are that there are human rights, and what are they? You need to know.
Only a technical person.
Yeah, you need to understand that there are such things as human rights. You need to understand that there are such things as constitutional rights, and you need to understand what they are and what the definitions are. So if you're somebody who's investigating hate crimes, if you work in the criminal justice system and you can't define what a hate crime is, or you don't understand it in its full dimensions, then you're actually part of the problem. As far as even if your intentions are very good, you're still part of the problem, because all your decisions are going to be based on bad information. They're going to be based on stereotypes or biases or your ignorance, your ignorant interpretation of the law, or even of what the problem is. So it's education of people, and it's education of professionals. One of the things, and I guess this kind of goes along with it, but I think it's a third thing that has helped me a lot, and that is travel. I think that because it is personal education, but it's not really. What you're really doing is you're exposing yourself to other people. I think that too often we see people in movies and in television, and we are constantly being re-fed these terrible, terrible stereotypes of people. Stereotypes of conservatives, stereotypes of liberals, stereotypes of blacks, of whites, of Mexicans, stereotypes of white supremacists, stereotypes of people who are in the LGBT community. It doesn't matter. All the stuff that we're being fed in the media is a stereotype. What really helps is to go out and meet real people. That's what I think.
Yes. That's why we need to have these international communities. That's why when we go to, for instance, like Guatemala, Colombia, Panama, we meet other professionals. Yeah. And we have a 10-minute conversation. We start seeing we have more in common because we are forensic.
Yeah.
Forensic,
and we have the same problems. We have the same. We have the
same. It's basically the same problem.
And the same problem. Every time I meet somebody from Latin America, it seems like their goal is to try to get me to try shitty food. I have the same problem in every country.
Are you talking about street tacos?
No, I love, actually, you know that I love street burgers and I love street tacos.
Are you talking about street burgers? Oh, man.
Me and Martin, remember me and Martin? We went and ate street burgers at like 1 o'clock in the morning in Aguascalientes.
But you don't eat gorditas.
Well, it depends on what's in them. I don't eat them like just whatever. It depends on what's in them. You can put anything in a gordita. You know that, right?
And I eat what is in where we going.
That's because you know it's not going to be something that you don't want to eat.
Well, definitely.
I'm trying. You're struggling so hard with your prejudice against me right now. It's not. You don't have a prejudice against people. It's just me.
Oh, I get it. It's like now you're being attacked.
A reverse. This is reverse discrimination.
Oh, poor guy.
I know it's the worst. But one of the great things about the travel that we do is that I get to meet other people. I get to try their food, and some of it's very, very good. Oh my God, so good. Some of it I cannot.
Mole.
The mole in Oaxaca, the mole in Mexico is so good depending on where you go. Some of it's very good. Let's just say I've been to Vips. I've tried the mole there. It's not so good. But Vips is a restaurant chain for those people who don't know. It's like Denny's, basically Denny's. So, isn't it?
That's what they say. Vips, basically Denny's.
Basically Denny's, which I love Denny's, so I'm not complaining. So anyway, it helps me to understand that there are other people, that they have value, that I'm not the only person. I'm not the protagonist of the world. I exist in a world where there are other people with other needs and other problems. And you're very good at pointing out when I'm failing at that. So thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you.
I do my best. I do my best.
My failures are often and profound, and you're always right there to help me realize it. Always.
Exactly the moment you're
right at the moment that I'm failing. Be like 5-10 seconds before I'm realizing it, you're there.
That's my job, man.
I couldn't ask for a better partner.
You're welcome.
So those
make the world better.
You are one gringo at a time. So the three things I think, and I like to focus on these things. One is understand the education means understanding what hate crimes are, understanding these very basic definitions and educating yourself about them. 2, educating yourself about the world and all the different ideas and cultures in the world. Real information, real knowledge, not focusing or confining it to a religious or one religious or cultural lens or perspective. And then to increase accountability, to make sure that the people who are doing their jobs are actually doing them in accordance with the law, because the laws are usually pretty good and they recognize corruption and they recognize human rights and civil rights, right? I mean, that's I think fair. Unless you're in the Middle East and you're a woman, I guess that's different. But now if you're gay,
or in Mexico,
or in Mexico, right? Or in Mexico. And then finally, expose yourself to other people. Get out there and talk to other people. Do not sit behind a computer screen and think that you understand the world, because you don't. All right?
No.
It's so important. Any other thoughts you want to leave us with on this? Because this is a conversation we're going to have for the rest of our lives. I just wanted to get this part of it on the record with these definitions and these concepts.
I just think that it's an ongoing conversation, and I think we need to have it. We need to have it in these terms, like exploring the concept, exploring the consequences, exploring, the ways of thinking, because we need more talks like this in actual academia of forensics, in actual courtrooms.
Right.
And I'm talking specifically about the forensic community.
Yeah.
I don't hear a lot about this in our communities, and I think that's part of the problem.
Well, I want to leave my parting thought is that I think that hate crimes. I just want to say I think it's important to understand why hate crimes are bad, and why prejudice and bias are bad, and that's because it leads to the marginalization and harm of other people. And if you have a culture, or if you have a belief system, or if you have a personal identity that's based on hurting other human beings, marginalizing them, taking things from them, exploiting them, then you're a piece of shit. That's my thought.
Yeah. Well, sometimes government can be a very big like that.
Very big like that? Yeah. The government is, we are the government. The government is a reflection of who we, as far as I'm concerned, they're a mirror. Whoever gets into government, they're put into power by people who let them get there. And it's almost as though the most base among us are cheering on the most corrupt among them. As though, see, look what I told you. They're just all bad. But you're not going to do anything about it. You can get them out by voting them out. That's all you got to do. Yeah. So those are my thoughts. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me this evening. What are you up to next? What are you doing next?
Well, I'm going to Guadalajara tomorrow. I'm going to be in the prosecutor's office. I'm going to give a lecture about crime investigation, crime investigation and psychology, forensic psychology.
Okay.
And we're going to be together. I'm going to be in Guatemala next week.
Oh, yeah. Say hi to Damer for me. Our good friend Damer Melendez is
So
in.
I'm going to see Damer there. I'm going to be in Guatemala. I'm going to be in Durango, Ciudad de Mexico, Zacatecas, and other cities too. And we see each other by the end of this month in Chicago, right?
In Chicago, you and I together at Prairie State College. I really appreciate your time, Aurelio. Now get back to work.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
No, thank you.